Fresh off winning the Roki Sasaki sweepstakes, the Dodgers have now landed the top reliever on the board, Tanner Scott. How can the Mets compete with that budding dynasty in LA? I'm going to talk about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, the baseball world was pretty fired up on Sunday because the news came out Sunday morning. The Los Angeles Dodgers are the team that landed Tanner Scott services. The top reliever on the board goes to the Dodgers on a 4-year, $72 million deal. Once again, a contract with a huge signing bonus and a bunch of deferred money to try to circumvent that luxury tax a little bit. This Dodgers team is getting too loaded, and fans are pissed. You don't want to see one team have this collection of talent, and it is very frustrating. I know Mets fans were hoping they would sign Tanner Scott, although as I talked about in the show when they signed AJ Minter, that was pretty much an admission that they were not going to land Scott. And I'll tell you what, you have the Cubs, you have the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, all of these teams that apparently were in on Tanner Scott until the very end. At least the Mets have AJ Minter. You have to give the Mets credit for understanding what the market was for Scott and getting out and getting a plan B that was really solid in AJ Minter. Tanner Scott gets a 4-year, $72 million deal. Again, Minter got 2 years, $22 million. And yes, Tanner Scott's coming off 2 unbelievable seasons. Had a 2.31 ERA in 2023 and a 1.75 ERA in 2024. He was the best reliever on the market for a reason. With that said, prior to those 2 years, Tanner Scott had a career 4.61 ERA. You look at the career of AJ Minter, he has been better for longer, has a really good track record, has more experience pitching in this division. I'm not saying he's better than Tanner Scott, but is he at least a third as good as Tanner Scott? Because that's what he got paid. $22 million guaranteed, only 2 years compared to a 4-year deal. And let's not just look at this and say, oh, the Mets could have got Tanner Scott for $72 million. No, the Mets would have had to overpay and outbid the Dodgers to have gotten Tanner Scott. Because here's the thing. Everybody wants to play in LA right now. Because if you are looking at your career and this is your one chance to pick your team, and one of your goals at the end of your career is to win a World Series ring, which team are you going to pick? If you can be part of a team that's going to win 110 games every year, fly into the playoffs with a bye, and have a great chance to come out of the tournament with a ring on your finger, and you can get paid your market value to do it, most guys are going to take that deal. Now, I appreciate the free agents that say, no, I don't want to take that easy route. I don't want to be part of that super team. I want to go and be the guy that'll put the Red Sox over the top. But if Tanner Scott did that, he might not make the playoffs in the 4 years that he signed this deal. And he might get traded at some point because the Red Sox aren't making the playoffs. So you can't fault the players too much. It is really frustrating that all of these players keep on going to the Dodgers. But that's just the position they've put themselves in. A decade of a well-run franchise that has the resources. And now you're seeing what the Mets hope to one day become. A team that is hated around the league because they're so good. That's what you want to aspire towards. But the Mets are a long way away from being the Dodgers. They can be good. They can beat the Dodgers, and we'll talk about that throughout the show. But the embarrassment of riches the Dodgers have right now, it's just absurd. Because I haven't even talked about the fact on this show that they landed Roki Sasaki. We had a Pete Alonso news break that has controlled this show for days now. Roki Sasaki ended up picking the Dodgers because of course he did. And so now you look at the Dodgers rotation, Blake Snell, who they added this offseason, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who they signed for $325 million last offseason, Tyler Glasnow, who they traded for and extended last offseason, Shohei Ohtani, who got $700 million last offseason, and now Roki Sasaki. That's their 1 through 5, all of them aces. And by the way, they still, at this point, expect Clayton Kershaw to return to them and be ready at some point midseason. If he can even scratch the rotation, because you also have Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin, who are now healthy off of Tommy John. Those guys have pitched great in the past. Bobby Miller had a great season last year. Good luck finding the rotation. Beyond those guys, and we just listed off, 9 pitchers? They have Landon Knack, Emmett Sheehan, Ben Kasperius, Gavin Stone, Justin Robleski, River Ryan. There's probably more. I think a couple of those guys might be hurt. But the point is, the Dodgers have well more than 10 viable starting pitchers on their 40-man depth chart. They are so stacked. It's insane. And then now you talk about the bullpen. This bullpen now adds Tanner Scott. They re-signed Blake Treinen this offseason. So Treinen, who was absolutely nails throughout the playoffs, particularly in the World Series, he's back. Evan Phillips, who's been ridiculously good for them, he's still there. Michael Kopech, who they traded for last offseason, he's there. That's 4 guys who can be absolutely lights out throughout the end of games. Alex Vesia has been outstanding for the Dodgers in his career. Bruce Dark-Gratterall, same thing. That builds you at the 6. Anthony Banda and Ryan Brazier were both really good last year. That's 8. And there's more arms beyond them. They have so much pitching. And by the way, the top 4 in their lineup is, once again, Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, and Teoscar Hernandez. Behind them, you still got Max Muncy, who can put together a big season. Tommy Edman for a full year, who gives you great defense in either center field or shortstop, wherever they need him, plus a at least league average bat. And he was the NLCS MVP against the Mets because he has the ability to be ignitable with his bat. You have Michael Conforto now, and good for him, gets a chance at a ring on a 1-year deal. Will Smith, one of the better catchers in baseball. And then they signed the infielder from Korea, Hae-Sung Kim. I'm not sure how to pronounce that any differently than the guys who played for the Padres for years, but you're talking about a versatile defender who's supposed to be pretty quick, great with the glove. It'll probably take him some time with the bat. If he doesn't work out, you still got Miguel Rojas on your bench. You still got Chris Taylor. You got Andy Pages. You got James Outman. I mean, they are just loaded in every single direction you look. There is a potential star. There's either a established star or a guy that could be a star. Because if Andy Pages was on the Mets right now, he'd probably be starting in some capacity because he is good enough that the Mets would just try him out in center field and say, yeah, it's better than Jose Siri or Tyrone Taylor. Pages might not even see the field. What the Dodgers have done is build a team that is equivalent to the evil empire of the Yankees in the early 2000s. A team that goes into each year and is expected to win the World Series. So if you're the New York Mets, how do you compete with that? And does the signing of Tanner Scott push the Mets to do anything else to get a little bit closer? I want to talk about that in the next segment. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has got you covered. It's not just the playoffs. You got NBA action. You got MLB futures. You can find all of that over at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You're going to get started with $300 in bonus bets if you win that first bet. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Our next goal is to get to 12,000 subscribers. We're almost there. So hit that subscribe, and I appreciate all of you who already have. Now, how do the Mets compete with the Dodgers? When you look at their offseason so far, it feels like the Dodgers have landed everybody. But let's remember, the Mets have not been inactive. So I don't like Mets fans who are saying, oh, David Stearns, do something. The Mets have done a lot this offseason. They traded for Jose Siri. They acquired Frankie Montas and Clay Holmes, signed those guys. They then get Juan Soto, which was not nothing. It's pretty significant. They have addressed their bullpen now, signing AJ Minter. They re-signed Jesse Winker. They have made moves. And their roster, while not at the level of the Dodgers by any stretch, they have checked the box of depth for sure. Because they also signed Griffin Canning, which gives them another depth arm in that rotation. Now, in comparison, when you look at the Dodgers who signed Blake Snell, added an ace into the fold, signed Michael Conforto, 1-year outfielder, got paid like double Jesse Winker. So take that for what it's worth. I'd say Conforto is still probably a better player, but regardless. Not the biggest of moves, but they extend Tommy Edman. They re-sign Blake Trinan, who is probably better than AJ Minter, let's be honest. They re-sign Teoscar Hernandez. They land rookie Sasaki, and now they sign Tanner Scott. What is the common denominator of all of those moves that the Dodgers made? Did they overpay for a single one? A single one of them? I don't believe they did. Each and every one of those guys wanted to be a Dodger. Teoscar Hernandez, Blake Trinan, they wanted to come back. Tommy Edman had a great run, gets traded there, wins the World Series. Yeah, I'm more than happy to get my money now and extend. Michael Conforto, 1-year deal to go play for the Dodgers. Why not? Blake Snell, you want to reunite with Andrew Friedman, who I guess probably drafted you back in those days in Tampa. Yeah, let's go be one of the aces for the Dodgers. And then Sasaki, all these teams are in the sweepstakes. Now, I mean, there's some owners that want the Dodgers to be looked at for collusion because it just seems like it was always going to be Sasaki going to the Dodgers, no matter how much Joel Wolf got out in front of it and said, oh, Sasaki might want to go to a small market. He really cares about who's going to develop him. He doesn't necessarily need any mentors from Japan. But, oh, yeah, they just were so convincing in those meetings that he decided all of a sudden, just this past week, he was going to be with the Dodgers, or maybe that was decided long ago. And I don't blame Sasaki for wanting to be a Dodger, for wanting to go play with two guys that he was on the national team with a couple years ago and win World Series and, establish his big league career, and then in 6 years, potentially cash in for a monster contract after winning a couple championships. Like, I don't blame him at all. But that's the thing, is they don't have to overpay any of these guys. In fact, in some respects, some of them maybe take some discounts. Sasaki took less. Tanner Scott might not have taken less. I mean, there was a report that the Red Sox had come out and had given him more years and for a higher average annual value, but that already got debunked. Regardless, there was other teams that were right there. But what did he want to do? He wanted to go play for the Dodgers. So as we look at what the Mets had to do to compete with the Dodgers, it's not something that you can do in an offseason. You can't just flip a switch and get there. The Dodgers had a change in ownership back in 2012. Andrew Friedman took over the team after the 2014 season. So he's now had 10 years running that front office the right way, spreading out the money and spending it the right way. Did they go after Trey Turner and sign him long-term? No, because they identified him as a guy that might not age as well. He has not been what he was in LA for the Phillies. Did they try to re-sign Max Scherzer when the Mets did? Yeah, but they didn't overpay to get him. When the Mets came over the top, they let Scherzer go. They don't overpay. So the idea that the Mets had to react to the Tanner Scott signing by calling Pete Alonso back up and saying, screw it, we'll give you that $90 million. That's not how you compete with the Dodgers. How you compete with the Dodgers is by offering Pete Alonso the $69 million deal over 3 years, a fair market value, because that $10 million that you might save per year, you can reinvest that next summer and get the next guy that you don't even know who it is at this point. It's about running the organization the right way. And I think the Mets are in a position right now where they are getting there. But yes, we're in year 5 of the Steve Cohen era, but I think you could pretty much throw out the first 4 years of it. The only really long-lasting move that the Mets made across those first 4 years was trading for Francisco Lindor and extending him. It's the only one. I mean, you could say, oh, it's good they had Brandon Nimmo and Edwin Diaz in the books, but is it? I mean, right now, if the Mets could get out of those contracts, would they? Would you prefer Edwin Diaz and the money he's getting now or Tanner Scott? Personally, I always have a soft spot for guys that have been wearing a Mets uniform. I'd still probably take Edwin Diaz, but I'm sure a lot of you would say you're crazy with the 2 seasons that Tanner Scott just had. But you have Edwin Diaz in the books, so you're not going to sign Tanner Scott as well. You had Brandon Nimmo on the books for 6 more years. Was that the wisest investment, really? I love Brandon. I love he gets to spend his entire career in a Mets uniform. But we'll see. If he continues on the trend of what we saw last year, in a couple years, this might look like a bad investment. He was signed to be a center fielder, and now he's a left fielder. So what we have to, you can't have it both ways. You can't want the Mets to compete with the Dodgers, and when the smart executive takes over, you hate him because he's not overspending. Because how the Mets get to a point where in 2035, everybody hates the Mets around baseball because they're a team that keeps on winning and keeps on getting on the free agents, is you establish a culture of winning. You prioritize your farm system. Why are the Dodgers able to get Tommy Edman and Michael Kopech at the deadline? Because they have a great farm system. Why were they able at one point to trade for Trey Turner and Max Scherzer? They have a great farm system. And they continue to draft, sign, replenish. And it's just, it goes on and on and on. You can talk about the money they spend, but really the greatest renewable resource for the Dodgers is that farm. So you want the Mets to go out and sign Anthony Santander because you're just desperate to win this year. Well, now you're giving up draft capital that you can use on your farm system in the future. So the Mets are in a position right now where they have to put their best foot forward each year to build out the best team that they can under their constraints. You can't just say, oh, well, the Dodgers are spending $375 million, so the Mets should spend an extra $100 million to get there. Because then you might be making $100 million in bad investments that set you back further. Last year, the Mets did have a $350 million payroll. $70 million of it were the guys who weren't on the Mets from bad investments from the past guys that were running the team. So what I would say as far as where the Mets are at right now, they have done the best they could throughout this offseason to win in the short term and the long term. Juan Soto is 26 years old. Did they overpay to get him in some respects? Yes. Juan Soto, when it comes to present day value, costs $300, just $300. He costs $300 million more than Shohei Ohtani. Now, it's a 15-year deal instead of a 10-year deal, but per average annual value for the luxury tax, he's making $5 million more. And he only does one thing, hit. Ohtani hits and pitches. And if he actually did play right field, he'd play a much better right field than Juan Soto, if we're being honest with ourselves. But that was a guy that was worth investing in because it was a culture-shifting signing where you got one of the best 5 bats in Major League Baseball, and he's going to be in your lineup to build around. It was setting some bedrock that you can really have a foundation on for this franchise. It was worth it. But caving to 6 years and $180 million that Pete Alonso wanted and just saying, yeah, we'll do it because we're the Mets and because we can and because we have Steve Cohen's pocketbook. It's not the wisest investment, even though I wish they did sign Pete and I hope they still do. But the more you sit back with it, you got to trust David Stearns in this. Because if you trust David Stearns, and the reality is, it doesn't matter if the fans do, Steve Cohen does. And he really is one of the top executives in baseball, which he's proven now with what he built in Milwaukee, which is one of the best, most successful small market franchises that we have in the game right now that just continues to draft well, develop well, and find the right pieces to win that division a lot more than they should with that payroll. He's proven that he knows what he's doing. You got to trust him in this. And ultimately, I think one day he's going to get you to the point where the Mets are, I don't know if they're ever going to be what the Dodgers are now, but where they really will be a destination where guys are taken less and you can actually get the star players without having to overpay. The Mets are getting closer to that, but they're now in year 2 of the David Stearns era. The Dodgers are going into year 11 of the Andrew Friedman era. And it takes a while to catch a dynasty. But that does not mean that the Mets can't win while this dynasty is going on in LA. Because as we've learned in the past, it's hard to win the World Series in Major League Baseball. And all a dynasty means is you have more cracks at winning it all. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to continuously do it. So I want to talk about that a little bit to close out the show. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened with me. I was just so frustrated when I realized that I had subscriptions that I've been paying for month after month after month that I just wasn't even catching. And I would have kept paying for them had I not used Rocket Money, a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It also monitors your spending and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's those subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. And Rocket Money has over 5 million users that have saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/lockedonmets. When was the last time we saw a dynasty in Major League Baseball? I mean, you could say the Dodgers have been a dynasty over the last decade, but when it comes to winning World Series, not really. You can look at the Astros who have won a lot or the Red Sox. But really, if we're talking dynasty, aren't we looking at teams that can win back-to-back? And when's the last time that happened in Major League Baseball? You have to go all the way back to when I was 5 years old, and I'm almost 30. Back in 2000 for the last time a team repeated as World Series champions. And that team won 3 in a row, and that was the Yankees. 1998 through 2000, and they won in 96 as well. So 4 out of 5 years, the beginning of Derek Jeter's career. That is the last real dynasty we have had in Major League Baseball. But what happened after all those World Series? Look at 2000 through 2007. The Yankees never missed the playoffs, and across that 7-year span, they averaged 98 wins per season. They had Jeter, Mariano Rivera, Jorge Posada, Andy Pettitte. They brought in pitchers. They had Mike Mussina, Roger Clemens. They had Bernie Williams, Tino Martinez, Alfonso Soriano, Robinson Cano. They got other superstars that they signed, like Jason Giambi, Hideki Matsui, Alex Rodriguez, Gary Sheffield. Randy Johnson wore the pinstripes for a little bit. They were loaded across that window. And yet, how many World Series did they win in a 7-year span? Zero. 2008, they missed the playoffs. 2009, they made the playoffs again. They won the World Series, and they have not won since, despite a lot of really good seasons. But that team, that era of Yankees baseball, is the last time we saw a team as hated as the Dodgers are right now. The Astros have been hated for a different reason. They've been hated because they won, but they're also hated because they cheated. The Yankees in the early 2000s were hated for the same reason the Dodgers are hated now, because they collected all the star players. And yet, a lot of teams won the World Series when the Yankees were that good. You look at that window, And in that 7-year span, when again, they averaged 98 wins per season with all of that talent, they went to 2 World Series, they lost them both, and they lost them to two expansion teams, the Diamondbacks and the Marlins. The one other time they were in the ALCS across that 7-year window is when they blew the 3-0 lead to the Red Sox as the Red Sox broke the curse of the Bambino. The other 4 times in that 7-year span, they lost in the ALDS. So as we look at this team on paper with the Dodgers that looks impossible to beat, you get to October, anything can happen. Anything can happen. Look at this past year. The Dodgers didn't have Tyler Glasnow when they got to the playoffs. They didn't have Clayton Kershaw. They didn't have Bobby Miller. They were left with Jack Flaherty, who they traded for at the deadline. This year, you wouldn't think they'd have to trade for an ace, but you never know. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who was still kind of coming back from injuries and wasn't fully himself until he really got into form in October. And same thing with Walker Buehler, who struggled for the whole year and then figured it out for them. If Walker Buehler was the guy that we saw in the regular season, the Dodgers might not have won the World Series. That's one thing that could have gone differently, and the Mets might have been in the World Series against the Yankees. That Game 3 goes another way because Walker Buehler is not as crisp as he was. You never know what would have happened. And just as you play the what-if game, imagine if Kodai Senga didn't pull his calf. If the Mets got the Kodai Senga that we watched against the Braves before that injury, who struck out 9 in 5 innings and was absolutely rolling right before the trade deadline. Imagine if that Kodai Senga was with the Mets for the full second half. Maybe the Mets, with a 6-man rotation, have a better version of Sean Manaea in the playoffs that doesn't run out of gas. If the Mets had that rotation against the Dodgers, maybe they do win 2 more games. And even the Dodgers were a significantly better team ultimately. If you really look at what they had and how the Mets stacked up against them, the Mets could have gotten past the Dodgers. They were a couple wins away. Few things break in a different direction. You really never know. Now, obviously, in retrospect, we saw it all play out. The Dodgers were the best team in baseball last year. But the best team in baseball does not always win. If the Mets were in the NL West or if the Dodgers were in the NL East, I would be concerned. But they aren't in the same division. So you don't have to worry about competing against the Dodgers. You got to worry about trying to win the National League East against the Braves and the Phillies. And an upstart Nationals team that doesn't have a chance, I don't think, to win the division, certainly, but a team that is probably going to play a spoiler a little bit here to these 3 supposed powerhouses, because the Nationals are well on their way to getting back into contention with a much better team. But those are the teams you got to worry about, being better than those NL East teams. And we will talk about how the Mets stack up right now against those 2 teams, but I feel pretty good about it. Do the Phillies have a better rotation than the Mets? Yes. Do the Braves? If Spencer Strider comes back healthy and Chris Sale can do it again and Ronaldo Lopez can do it again, maybe. But I could see a world where that doesn't work out for the Braves. Who has the best lineup? I don't know. Maybe it's the Braves. Maybe it's the Phillies. But if the Mets figure things out, if they do end up landing one more bat, they might have the best player in this division. They might have the best 2 players in this division with Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor. We don't know if Acuna is going to come off of another ACL and just be the man again. We don't know if Matt Olson's going to be the guy we saw last year, the one that hit the 53 homers. Or is it 52? 51? Whatever. He had a 50. Was it 54? I don't even know anymore. He had 50 home runs in 2023. Is he going to be that guy again? Or is he going to be the guy that I don't think got to 40 last year? Is Bryce Harper going to be healthy? There's a lot of what ifs. Have the Mets put themselves in a position right now where they can compete in the National League East? I think the answer is yes. So, sure, the Dodgers are a titan right now. And I hope one day the Mets can be at that level, that 10 years into the David Stearns era, when I'm recording this show and I'm, almost 40. I hope I've watched some Mets World Series titles at that point, and I hope that this is a team that is consistently producing great prospects, has produced some homegrown stars. That'd be nice. Seems like they might have a couple with Vientos and Alvarez, but the jury's still out. and a team that is a real destination. Yes, they have been able to sign some free agents thanks to Steve Cohen's pocketbook. But a team that gets the Blake Snells of the world or the Tanner Scotts of the world, where all they care about is getting to their market value or close to it, and they might even take a little bit less to go play for you. That's where you want to be. And the Mets can't wave a wand and be there overnight with Steve Cohen making the payroll $400 million. That's a short-term solution. But the Mets are interested in a long-term solution, and that's the vision of David Stearns and of Steve Cohen right now. So we can get mad about Pete Alonso not coming to the Mets. But if he doesn't come down on his ask, this is the Mets trying to build towards being a Dodgers-like franchise. One that is run properly, that assesses the value of players, pays that value, and convinces them to sign because it's the place you want to play. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. Throughout the week, barring any news to react to, we're going to start setting the stage a little bit for the upcoming season. I am going to do a show this week comparing the Mets right now to the Phillies and the Braves. I also want to talk a little bit more about this Plan B post-Alonso. What internal solutions do the Mets have? Are they really good to roll with that? And can their patience pay off in getting someone better? Is there anything in the trade market? There's going to be a ton to discuss. So make sure you are following along. If you are listening to the show today, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, again, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider and be part of our texting service, find a link in the episode description. Or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. If you want to follow me on social media, you can do so at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day, not for your second watch. Head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. We're talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.